is known to many of you, but I've only lived in this village for a relatively short time compared with Lois, who I think has been here since 1972. And as a person given the role of introducing the speaker, I thought I'd better learn something about her. So I asked her, and she says, I'm no historian. However, having had a quick preview of her talk, I think we are going to discover that she is a very good local historian. So without further ado, a warm round of applause please for Lois.
Well, thank you, William, and I'm not a historian, that's for sure. But some of you may know me from other talks that I've given from the past few years. At the Lenny Green AGM, originally we had the local history talks through what is our local historian, Mary Forbes, and she got to the point where she couldn't do any more, and I thought, well, we better try and do something ourselves. So I've been taking over and have done several local history talks. And this was one that I actually put together for 2014 to mark the start of World War I. I just thought that was something that should be looked at and was a good subject. So I looked up all the local archive material that I could find. I was fortunate to have access to the local history group's archive, which is very good. And I'm very thankful to local people who talked to me and let me have anything further. So it's just a simple talk really that I put together at that time that will just give you a snapshot really of the parish in that time, or at least I hope it will. It will only paint a small picture, and hopefully more will come forward as these talks to do with the parish remembering now will sort of bring forward. So I'll apologise for any mistakes I make, and that is covered by not being a historian. That's fair, isn't it? And I'm sure anybody will put me right. I think at the end, if there's time, we will have some questions and I can possibly answer them, or probably people have things to comment about. So we'll make a start. I put this one in because the very beginning of the history of this parish, or the early history of it anyway, not the beginning, but it really stems from the time when the Cheddar Valley Railway was put in from Yatton to Wells, and the railway came through the village of Sanford and it came through the village of Winscombe. And it must have been rather a strange sight when it appeared in 1869. Quite something. We've just had a pipe go through on the Strawberry Line, which has been major upheavals, but imagine a railway going in with all the embankments and the cuttings and all this work going on. So that is the start. Now, once that was in, the place changed. And the period we're covering is one of absolute extremes, because it must have been absolutely traumatic for the nation to go from what was regarded as golden age, the Edwardian times of prosperity, to these awful horrors and devastation of World War I. And that halted progress in the country, and it wiped out a generation of young men. But Winscombe Station, of course, brought these changes to our parish. This little sleepy hollow that we had here, just of farmsteads dotted around, started to attract gentlemen of means, and the houses in the householders in 1901 was 283, and by 1911 it was 342. That doesn't sound very many, but that's quite significant in our parish. The housing that was being put up, a lot of it was high quality, for this growing population. A lot of them would have had living help. Of course, builders needed to come in, and tradesmen, and businesses needed to build up. The other thing that happened was that mains water came in 1900 and electricity in 1911. New schools we followed the coming of the railway. We had a new school in Winscombe, the Victorian School, went in 1881, and the Sanford School, which is the present school, went in 1891. This church was built in 1884, and the Methodist church here went in 1900. And also here, a village hall. You've got your village hall with the land coming from one of the local wealthy landowners. In 1909 that was opened. So quite a bit is happening just on that front of kind of infrastructure for us. But the most changed place of all is Woodborough, because when the railway came through, it was just about 3 or 4 farms, and why it was even had a station is interesting, because there was nothing there, and it was only a mile from Sanford, so why did they put it in? And I believe that's because the chief engineer, Francis Fox, had been a scholar at Sidcup School and his brother, and they thought that would make a nice little place for the school children to come to direct by train. But that is the area that built up the most. People, of course, are fortunate because it's a pretty spot on the edge of the Mendips with beautiful views around, but they can access everywhere by train, and you can get to more or less every part of England on the train system. So that did attract people to come in, and it becomes the commercial hub of the parish at that time, and we start to see entrepreneurs coming in, and they become pillars of this new society here. The old order is still retained to some degree, but the new order is definitely buzzing. If we look at this, the church, parish church, is still important, but not long before 1900, the parish council was formed, and all the administration for our parish went to the parish council rather than the church. We have this, the vicars of the two churches were main players in daily life, the light and the serious, but they did other things as well. They were, this is Reverend Dodd of Winscombe. I don't have a picture of the Reverend Onslow, who was here in Sanford, but the Reverend Dodd was a founding member of the Cricket Club, and so on. The other important people are the gentry here, and this is a picture of the Yatman family. They came in the mid-19th century, and they built the big house on Winscombe Hill, Winscombe Hall. And this is the family there. That's Mrs. Anna Victoria Yatman, who cut the first start on the railway line to mark the start of work in the little cap, surrounded by her family, 3 sons and 4 daughters, and a son-in-law and a couple of grandsons that crept into that picture. But they are, the gentry are the major landowners, and they're quite influential, they're very well respected, they do good works, they are large employers of staff, and of course they are estate workers. But the parish is mainly still agricultural at this time, and this is a picture of the George family. And the one thing I'm sad about tonight is that my friend Margaret Ballard is not here, sadly, because this is a picture of her family on her mother's side, the George family, and they're all gathered around, probably harvest time, and I think that's a wonderful picture. So, this is Sanford at Vanderbilt Station, And this picture is post-1905, and I can tell that because it's got a passing loop and it's got a signal box. And it didn't have those till 1905 when they put a spur into Sandford Quarry. But that's quite a nice little picture of that. The station master is William John Williams, and his brother, Henry John Williams, is station master at Winscombe, which is quite unusual for those times. And it's a thriving station, not so much I think because of Sandford, but because of Banwell, and it is called Sandford and Banwell Station. And Banwell was quite a big, busy, bustling centre at that time. This is a picture of Sandford Quarry. It's a very early photo, but Sandford Quarry was working from 1800, but at this time it was supplying stone for building the Royal Edward Dock at Avonmouth. And from that time it becomes quite significant in supplying stone around the country. And it has this siding put in about 1905 to take the stone direct by rail into the back of Sandford Station. That was quite an important time. It's owned by Alfred Weeks, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him as we go. Now then, this is not a very good picture, but it is of the Railway Inn in Winscombe. And it's here to tell you that we are very well served with public houses in this area. There were 5, at least 5 that I know of. 2 up on the A38, the Railway Inn in here at Sandford, which is still there, the Railway Inn at Winscombe, which of course is now the Woodborough. And this is not the current Railway Inn. This is the old Railway Inn that was burned down. And where we're looking is roughly on the site of the new Woodborough Inn. But as well as these public houses, there are also beer houses. They're called beer houses. Most of those are in Sandford. And I think along with the beer was quite a bit of cider. But I think that the road through Sandford was always the main track. The old route was slightly different, on a slightly different sort of way. But, you know, it was a major route coming from Bristol. Where are we now? We've got the next one is William Thatcher. I don't know if any of you could remember, but he came in 1904 and he started a business here in Sandford. And he brewed champagne cider. It wasn't just cider, it was champagne cider. And he sold that to the elite in Bristol and as far away as London. So that established the Thatcher's business very firmly here, and of course it's now a huge great business, very successful. 2 livestock fairs were held every year in the parish, and they were held here on what was the corner of what was the old green, the village green in Winscombe, and that is where the new Woodborough Inn is now. That was the site of it. So as well as the livestock fairs, there was a May fair with a fun fair and things like that. And it's almost on exactly the same date that we hold the May fair in Winscombe, which I organised for my sins. And so that's rather nice that we're keeping that tradition almost alive. Next we have the road systems. This is the Turnpike Road, the Bristol to Bridgewater Turnpike, and the date of this photo would be about 1907. The roads all around are just dusty, they're not really metalled at all, so the travelling is a dusty business and very bumpy. The road coming in at the bottom is Winscombe Hill, and then you're looking towards Axbridge. And for some reason the screen is attracting flies. So, there we go. So next we have, coming along our ways, there's also drovers driving their livestock to markets. So that's the sort of scene you would be very familiar around about this Edwardian era. This, of course, is Sandford. An early picture of Sandford with, horse and cart coming down the main street there. The little building in the centre is the old school. Before the present school was built in 1891, the Yapmans, the landowning gentry of the area, put in a little school up on Winscombe Hill and a little school here in Sandford. And that sufficed until the new school was built. At that time, the premises were taken over by the postmaster, who was called Francis Austin, and he set it up as a reading room, which were very popular at the time, because they would have newspapers in there that people couldn't get. There wasn't a newspaper delivery, and a lot of people couldn't even afford a newspaper. So the newspapers were put in that reading room, and anybody could go in and read them. So this was a very new sort of part of people's education. This is the Sandford Post Office. Francis Austin was the postmaster here. He was the first postmaster here, and that's a picture that John Westlake gave me. Francis Austin was his grandfather. That is still there, of course. It's still the old village shop. I do think there were other shops in Sandford, but I haven't got to grips with where they were or what they were. But I think there were several shops in Sandford, more than you have now. This, of course, is Winscombe, and this is where the hub of our parish really is. What is happening there? You see the dirt surface on the road. We've still got horse-drawn vehicles, so it's quite early. On the right-hand side, there's a wooden door that would have been part of a sort of garage, well, not a garage, more of a barn. And that was owned by the Bird family, who came to the village as farmers and started doing a little bit of baking. And eventually, they got the whole of the other side of the road, that you can see over on the left, and put up the Bird's assembly rooms where all the socials were held for a long, long time. The Temperance Hotel next to it, which a lot of the parents visiting Sidcup School would have stayed at. The bakery, which is next along, which was a massive business, supplied the whole of the area with bread, did an awful lot of catering, and was the largest employer in the area at that time. Beyond that is a shop. That's all owned by Birds. So they were entrepreneurial family who came in. The next development we have, of course, is the motor car. And this, the gentry got it first, of course. And this is, again, back to the Yapman family. You see, this is Anna Victorious in her little Victorian cap with her son, Arthur Yapman, and our other son's in the other car. So that is what is coming in, and this will be, it's still pre-World War I. Next we've got, this is Winscombe Post Office, and this is to show you, it's in the Chestnuts, along Sidcup Lane in Winscombe. It's run by someone called Howard Brooks, and he runs the post office with his wife, and up above his daughter runs a school. The post office moved in the 30s to its present spot, but the school continued on till about the 70s, I think, it ran until. And then the Chestnuts was demolished for new development. But that was where the telephone exchange went in. So this is a new thing coming in as well. That's in 1908, the telephone exchange was installed. And the early numbers tell us who the important people of the day were. We've got, this chap is Bevan Lean. He was head of secret school. He had phone number 2. Sorry about this, I can't get out of this. I'll show you the next picture. Come on. Yes, the next, this picture is of Alfred Weekes' business. I've already mentioned him in connection with the quarry, but he, I believe, lived in the area before the railway came. But when the railway came, he took the opportunity to build his local empire. He became a haulier, and he built up a lot of trade with coal. He was the coal merchant for working out of Sandford Station. He was the coal merchant working out of Winscombe Station. And he also ran these carriages. He would meet people off the trains and take them on a scenic ride around the area. And he also owned the quarry. So he is doing very nicely, thank you. The other business that we've got here is Brown's. A lot of people know Brown's Corner, but they might not realise it was named after the Brown's, the grocers, who started small and built up this high-class grocers on the corner there, and that building is almost exactly the same today. They're very high-class grocers. They cured their own bacon. They kept things and they cured their own bacon. And they always had a wonderful display of sugar cones and all that sort of thing in the window. And you can see the horse and carts ready, for people doing their shopping. Not necessarily at Brown's, but in the village. They're coming in to shop in that hub of activity. He had number 4 telephone number. Oh, they had 5, sorry, they had 5 telephone number. This is a number 6 telephone number. This is Winscombe Hall. This is where the Yatmans lived, which is a very grand house. They were wealthy people who came in. This telephone number is number 11, and it's Dr. Leach. He's known as Dr. Leach, but he's from Jersey, and his name is really Dr. Lesh. And he lived in Axbridge, and he came and was a medical practitioner all around here, coming in on his horse. So I expect it took him maybe less time than it takes to get an appointment these days. And there you are, there he is. And I think he was a very popular man. He had a very strong French accent, but he was a bit of a character. And later on, he had a car. And he was renowned for screeching around in his car, and he would just pull up wherever he fancied at high speed. Fortunately, there weren't very many cars on the road, and he got away with it. But his son served in the war and was one of the ones who didn't return. There. This is another business at the top of the main street in Winscombe. In Ransford, you'll see that's a postcard, and it's got Ransford's written on it in the bottom right-hand corner. And his shop was what is now Do For You, tiny little shop, newsagents and stationers, but he also produced postcards. And he was the one who went around taking photographs. And he had a nickname of Sniffer, Sniffer Ransford. And we're coming on now to 1911. And this is the coronation of George VI and Queen Mary following the death of Edward VII, who had only been on the throne for about 10 years. Not surprising, because his mother lived to be a very old lady. And this was, of course, a celebration in all of the parish, and there was sports and a meat tea and a bonfire for that occasion. This is the final one before we move into the actual war years. And this is to flag up women's rights, which were very prevalent at the time. There was a lady called Mrs. Grubb who lived in a house called the Downs on the A38. It's now called Queensley Court, but that's where she lived, and she was holding meetings about women's rights at that time. It is the time of Emmeline Pankhurst, who that is, and she was active from about 1903, but in 1912 she was arrested 12 times, for protesting, organising these rallies and things. So that's the kind of mood in the parish. Just to say that it wasn't Emmeline Pankhurst who got the vote exactly. It was the efforts of the women in the war that actually won them the vote. But this is the kind of mood in the parish when war was declared on the 4th of August 1914. So, this was 1914 when I put this together, a year to remember, and it certainly was, and so is 2018. So we'll have a look at what's happening. And this is now just a little tribute to the men from the parish. Many of them were only boys at the time, and they went to fight in the Great War. 20, and I'm not sure the figures are accurate, there's some anomalies in the record. I think maybe it was 22 who actually didn't return, from about 200 who went to war. And the ones who did come back, very many of those were war-torn and injured, and so it's a very awful part of the history. But what I want to show you is a little bit of what was going on in the parish at that time, just a little idea of what it was. This is a military parade going through Winscombe. Nobody knows what it is. I haven't been able to find out what the picture is. But a territorial force was recorded in the Canister X-rays, and I like to think that's what this is. It could be Somerset Light Infantry, but what is interesting about it is the numbers going through, the signs of the station. This is taken probably from the bridge. Signs of the station, which is going off to the left. The gate there is going to Southleys, which are the older houses tucked behind the opticians and Roblin. The other route going off is Nippers Way, and in Nippers Way there is a Weeks coal cart, horse-drawn again, and in front of that is the station master, who I think would be Henry John Williams. So that's quite an interesting picture, I think. Sorry, we flipped there. Can I go back? It's harder to do it this way. Let's not worry too much about it. The previous picture was the North Somerset, the regiments for our local people was the North Somerset Yeomanry. This is Somerset Light Infantry. North Somerset Yeomanry Bath was the previous one. This is the Somerset Light Infantry going through. Or it could be, let me see. Right, don't worry about that. The start of the war, the parish council had held a meeting to recruit a new regiment in response to this poster, which is Kitchener, who was a very famous man because of the campaigns that he'd already fought. And there was an incredible response to this poster from volunteers. All the recruiting was voluntary at that time. And in the roll of service, as I've already said, there were 22 names of men willingly offered to go to fight at this time. And the problem was the inadequate training that they received. and 16 of them fell in total. The first two to fall in October only, 1914, was Thomas Sanford, and then 3 others went in the following year, 1915, Albert Dunn, Charles Petheram and Wilfred Ewing. In 1916 there weren't enough recruits coming forward, so conscription came in at that time. We also have a civil defence reserves, and this was 60 of the older men of the parish volunteered to do this, and some of those we can pick out. On the back row I don't know any of those, but the second from the left is John Ainsbury, who was head of the Winscombe School. Next to him, I think it is a chap called Dunster, after whom Dunster caught his name, because he lived in one of those houses there. Right at the far right, on the middle row, is Roland Kinsey, who had the draper's shop that is now the co-op. He was well known in the village. And I think there are a couple more, but Ron Mabbott we've got right at the front with a big black moustache is Ron Mabbott. Now they had a farm, and they were quite a famous family. So this is the drill hall. I'm not 100% sure when that was built. I hope it was before the First World War, but I'm not 100% certain that it wasn't after it. But they would have drilled, and they would have had some sort of training in this time. That is where Woodward Drive is now. That's familiar to you, which is just behind the Wren. This is Birds Hall, and this is the Red Cross. And the Red Cross is this is a nursing supply depot. As well as this, there were volunteers who came and did various things. And Sue Gunn told me way back that as a child, she remembered people coming into one of their rooms at Winscombe Hall to cut up old sheets to make bandages, and that she used to play on a machine that was used for rolling the bandages up. So that was a nice memory. A lot of local people wanted to do good deeds. There was a Mrs. Kenway who lived in the Lynch who converted her car to an ambulance and gave it to the Red Cross. And it must have been a big car because it would hold 4 people lying down. They weren't big cars in those days. And there was another lady who was running the temperance hall out of what is now the Scout Hut, and she would send parcels off to the troops. Winscombe sent parcels, the parish, parish council sent 200 cigarettes and 6 pounds of tobacco to Colonel Yatman at the front. He requested that for the men, and he also asked for warm socks for his men. There were quite serious food shortages. There were, and it was an agricultural committee, and they managed to set up 25 allotments locally. The school head was very keen for the children to get involved. He couldn't find them any land, but he showed them what they could do in his own garden. And the other thing was that crop protection became important. And in 1917, the parish council claimed for vermin that would be, or things regarded as vermin, 324 sparrows were killed and 38 rats. And they were brought in, probably by the children, and so much, they paid so much for each one, paid so much for each one. And the count was by rats' heads and tails, rats' heads and tails. So I think it was quite hard for local people. They didn't really have very much in the way of food and scraped along. I do have accounts of that, personal accounts that said it was quite harrowing, that the food shortages. This is Secret School. Their effort was to raise £450, and with this they bought 3 ambulances, which they sent to the front in April 1915. And this picture is just above the A38, as we know it now. That's snaking off into the background. At the triangle, you know that you come to by Secret School, the top side of Secret School. And a lot of the actual Quakers from the school, the old scholars, did fight in the war. They did make quite a lot of losses in their old scholars, but a lot of them, of course, went into the medical cause. This was another thing that came up. A poster, and this is for the Belgians, who were, it was reputed that there were 3 million Belgians were starving and destitute because the Germans had marched in, and an appeal went out from Axbridge Workhouse to a Christmas Day. People would just put some money in an envelope, they would get it towards support for the Belgians. And Secret School took it one stage farther, and they started a fund of their own, and they ended up taking in Belgian refugees for the duration of the war. And as a thank you at the end of the war, the refugees planted an avenue of trees that is still there, known as Belgian Avenue. So you can go and see that today. This is just a little house in Secret Lane that is a convalescent home, and I just put it in. There's no evidence that it was used in the war specifically, but of course a lot of soldiers were coming back injured, and there were lots of nursing facilities set up for that. And we mustn't forget the injured who were coming back, thousands of them. This one is taken at Monkshaven. It wasn't called Monkshaven then, that's on the corner of Secret Lane and the A38. It was known as Meadow Cottage. It was owned by Quakers, a lot of Quakers sort of coming into the area. And this is actually the Voluntary Aid Detachment, which was, I think, the voluntary arm of the Red Cross, doing sort of good works. And the 2 ladies in the big hats are Mrs. Chapman and Mrs. Follett, who was the wife of the previous vicar. And they did a lot towards the Red Cross. And they brought, this is believed to be a complement of men who are being nursed back in England, who are having a day out in the countryside. They come by train, but in front are scouts, and the Boy Scouts were very keen to do their bit. They formed a group, a troop in Winscombe in 1913. The Scout movement was started by Baden Powell in 1907, but we had them in 1913. This is obviously the war memorial award to the ones who served in the war, the order of service, roll of service at the church, and that's where everyone who went to war from this parish is named. And now we'll sort of talk a little bit about who served. I just wanted to mention before we get onto this that there were also prisoners of war serving here. There were internees and prisoners as well, and they worked in South Quarry. And it's known that the Austrians who came were very straightforward and no problem, but there was a little group of Prussians who were absolutely huge and quite fearsome, and the people handling them were a little bit scared of them, I think. But the story is, and it's related by someone who worked in the quarry, was that one of them caught pneumonia and died, and is buried in the Methodist burial ground. And after the war, they found a woman wandering around the quarry, and she was looking for her son who died. She'd come over from Germany. So that's the other side of the coin, if you like. This is not a good picture, but it's... Oh, sorry. Going back is tricky. I'm not going back at all.
No, there you are.
Right, okay, we're back. This is Alfred Westlake, and it's John Westlake's father. John's supposed to be coming tonight, but I'm afraid he hasn't made it. I spoke to him yesterday. And that's his family in the garden with him in uniform, with his parents. He went into Royal Engineer Signals in France, and he was laying cables in acres of mud, and the work had to be done at night, so they were scrabbling around trying to find the cables. This is him why did he have a horse? I'm not sure. I wish John was here, he would tell us. But there we are. He was very good with horses, obviously. And this was something that John has an artifact. It's just a knife built around getting stones out of horses' hooves, obviously. But what is interesting about it is it broke, and he repaired it from the stock of a bayonet. So that's something that he might take along on the night when people are going to take various sort of artifacts and mementos and talk about their families. And then we come to this one, and it's a memorial. And this was found by John's uncle, who was also fighting in the war. And he was a stretcher bearer. And he rescued, or he found a young German serviceman who had died, and on him he found this memorial to Karl Kreis, which I could see roughly what it was about, but my German wasn't good enough to translate it, so I got a friend to translate it. It still isn't big enough, is it? Can you read that at all? It's very, very touching, and it's about this young German who's died in the war, and the heartfelt outpouring from his family. And it just made me kind of quite emotional seeing this, because nowadays we can see both sides of these conflicts. And we know that that is exactly what was happening in our nightmare over there. So I felt that was fair to sort of show that side of the war. Some of the men I managed to get a few details of, not too many. I didn't find it very easy to get details of the men who've gone to war. But this one is Ronald Weeks. He's in the Somerset Yeomanry, as you can see. And his brother also served, but he is the son of Alfred Weeks, the coal merchant and quarry owner. So here he is with his family. He's down at the front there in his uniform look. His brother Hubert is next to him, and he went to war as well. His father Alfred is behind him, and that's his wife next to him. And on the far right is his daughter, and she's Ethel Weeks. She married Roland Kinsey, who we've already seen, who ran Kinsey's draper's shop. This is another young man who fought. It's Sergeant Jim Bancroft. He's the uncle of Barbara Bailey, everybody knows Barbara. He was a brave soldier, and he got the Croix de Guerre and laurels for gallantry in fighting in the front line. And he got the Distinguished Service Medal, but he was wounded in the chest and came home to be nursed. And according to Barbara, the wound was so big that you could put your fist in it. So that's just an idea of the injuries that was being sustained by our fighters at the front. Keep him in your mind. This one is, who is it? I can't remember him, I left him out. I won't worry too much about him, but it's David Fair's uncle, who was in the cavalry. He didn't know a great deal about him anyway, but I lost his name. This is a familiar character to maybe some of you. This is Arthur Yapman. He was a seasoned campaigner in the Somerset Light Infantry. He fought in the Boer War and came back a hero from that, and that's a photograph of the Boer War, which I think is pretty amazing to have something like that, and there's a whole series of photos of the Boer War that I've had access to. And this is him training with his regiment. He served throughout World War I. He was wounded in 1915 and then returned to command his men, his battalion. His letters home are quite harrowing about the conditions out there. He won the Distinguished Service Order and the Military Cross, and he was made colonel in 1921. He retired in 1924, but in the Second World War he commanded the Home Guard in this area, the Western Home Guard. He's obviously a son of the Yapman family, and 7 Yapmans actually served in World War I, so the gentry didn't hang back, they were all fighting. They were sons-in-law, and they were grandsons. There were 2 grandsons who went to fight. One was killed, and the other one was badly gassed and suffered for the rest of his life from those injuries. So we're coming on now towards the end of the war. And I'm not quite sure why I put the board up again, it's just to remind me that we're back on to the row. It will go eventually. There we are. This, in fact, is a group that I didn't know what it was at all, except it was of a train and it seemed to be in the local archive. But I actually showed this picture in Western at a thing I was doing for that history group. And one of them said, that's my uncle in the front, and he was in the Grenadiers. So I don't know if anybody can identify the uniforms, but I believe from that he was a Grenadier. And we certainly had one young man fighting, it was with the Grenadiers. So maybe it is true that that is a picture of the station here with a splendid GWR train, I have to say, and all the people in their sort of Edwardian outfits there. I mean, the trains were used quite a lot, and apparently they were incredibly efficient and did huge amounts of work. So the railway system was highly praised, shifting huge amounts of ammunition, soldiers, everything. So that's the Grenadiers going and seen off. And now we come to the letter that nobody wants to get. This is for a young man from the Barstow family. It's the only one I've seen, so it's the only one I've had to put up. But he was actually lived in Weston, and some people might recognise it, and that's the sort of letter you got from the King and Queen in those circumstances. And that, of course, is what you didn't want to get. This is the memorial for Sanford. I think it has 36 men listed on this memorial, and 4 of them didn't come back. I think there was an original board, a lot of you from Sanford, I gather there was an original wooden board that was on the side of the garage where Garth Humphries is now, and it disappeared. So you're left with a sort of copy. I know there's a copy up here in the church somewhere. This memorial is in the community centre in Winscombe. At the time, of course, it was the school. And these were the pupils who had been to the school. Also, it's, they are fallen. And how many we got on there? I think it's 10. So, this is the roll of honour on the board in the church, parish church porch. And I think that's 16 young men who fell. The ages are quite sad, it's when you see them close up. I'll put something up you can see a little bit in a minute. So this is the Book of Remembrance. This was compiled by the British Legion. I'm not quite sure when, but in relatively recent times, they put this together, and there's a piece for every soldier who fell in the war. And there's a copy here in Sanford Church somewhere, and there's a copy in Winscombe Church. So you can actually go and look at those. It took them 2 years to put them together. So that's a fine sort of memorial to them, tribute. And then on the pages, I've compiled this from the Book of Remembrance. We haven't really got time to look in detail and put all these young men who fallen, but if you just look at the right-hand side, you see the ages of them. They're really young, some of them. And some of you may recognise. I don't know if anyone here has got relatives who didn't return from the war. But they're all on this board. And this one is the only picture that I've got of one of the soldiers who didn't return. And this young man, he's younger than he looks actually. It's Captain John Leecroft. And he is the grandson of the Yapmans who died. His mother was Alice Yapman, and she married the Lord of the Manor of Roborough, and he went into Somerset Light Infantry. They all did. All of the Yapman men went into that regiment. So, another, I think it was his brother, also fought, and he got badly gassed. That was a very common thing in World War I. The mustard gas was serious, and that is why in World War II everybody was issued with a gas mask right at the beginning, because they feared the gas more than anything would come our way. But luckily it didn't. But the gas was, a lot of the soldiers returning would be suffering from that. That you didn't get over at all. Back to the remembrance. I've got too many of these, but do you want to linger on it and read it, or I think you have to just remember. That's a lot of them are, of course, got graves in France, and there are 2 in the graveyard in Winscombe. Are there any in the graveyard here? Anybody know? No. There are 2 in Winscombe attended by the War Graves Commission, I think. And there we have the memorial at the Parish Church. And that's a little bit closer up, and you can see all the names are on there. And that will be happening again this year when it's going to be a special service on that day. So now I just need to say that Winscombe and Sanford are just 2 of the places with war memorials, but there are a question of what to do. The war's gone, it's been a terrible time, and people want to commemorate it and do something. So what happens is that the parish council takes on this role, and they decide that a war memorial is to take the place of a recreational ground, and that is what was done. That's the plate there at the wreck. Purchased by public prescription. The ground was actually donated, and they raised, how much did they raise? £540. And it was actually officially opened in September 1922 by our war hero, Sergeant James Bancroft, the one who was highly decorated. And I think that, in that beautiful position at the base of the Menley Hills, it's a really fitting tribute to those men, not just the ones who didn't come back, but the ones who fought as well. And to this day, it's commemorating that horrific of events. So that's the end. I think that is the end. And what I would say is to go and have a look at the memorial books in the churches and the graves and the boards. That's the end.
Okay, there is time for just a few questions.
Yes.
You're happy to take questions?
I'll do my best.
Yes. Okay, one at the back to start us off with.
No, such a fantastic set of data there. Where is it formally recorded, other than your own personal collection?
I don't think it is recorded anywhere else. There are snippets of things in various books, which a lot of you will know, the Book of Winscombe. Just personal records and the photographic archives that I've been able to get, because obviously with a presentation like this you can't do anything without the pictures. So I'm limited in a way to what I can say to the pictures that I've actually got. But there isn't a specific record like this, and
right.
Obviously I've got a lot more that I couldn't fit into a short talk. But no, I don't believe it is recorded.
I think
the Second
maybe
World War is better recorded. There's more of that, but I don't know of anything specifically. No.
Maybe we should address that.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mike. Yes.
At Langford, there's a residence behind what used to be Langford Post Office, and I understand that it was Somerset Light Infantry recruiting office, and there is quite a large space in front of the house, and that used to be where they paraded.
Wow.
Right.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Somerset Light Infantry obviously was, the major regiment for here. The North Somerset Yeomanry looks like, that was something that happened because of the World War I.
Yes.
So,
It's a residence now.
I'm sure there must be lots of information on the military records, but I haven't gone delving into those.
No.
But
Just on the military records, Philip, I know, has been doing research on in his own family. Would you like to say a little bit about gives an idea of what information is available for individual people to do?
Well, almost every, even old ones, have museums. In my case, I will spoil my talk when I talk.
Yes, sorry.
In my case, I discovered that, in fact, I had a great uncle who was killed while enough in Sinai, because while the Great Western Front, there were wars going on right around the world, including in Sinai. He was killed in Sinai. And there is the Warwickshire Yeomanry Museum, and there's a man there who will tell you everything about an individual. And I've got photographs of all sorts of things, the exact circumstances of his death, everything. It's quite remarkable.
Yeah. Presumably there is something similar for the Somerset Yeomanry.
I'm sure it has been. And of course the other thing I didn't mention that I meant to was that there was a flying corps in the First World War. There was the flying corps, and there was the Royal Flying Corps, and there was a naval one as well. And I do know what that one was called. Can't remember it off the top of my head, but there was a naval flying corps of some sort, and they combined to form the Royal Air Force. The RAF was formed at the end of the war. And I do know there was a local, possibly some of the ones that who've fallen were in the flying corps in some way. You have to inspect all those things, but that came out of the war.
Say, when you mentioned about the German moving, how moving it was, a few years ago I was in the Austrian Tyrol, in a very small village. They've got a war memorial there, loads and loads of names, but they mention the names of all where they were killed, the different places all around that. That was moving to see that.
I mean, it's like that if you look at the Book of Remembrance.
Oh yeah.
Because I just, compiled a little list with roughly a few details. But in the Book of Remembrance, there are more details. Not about everyone, but some of them will give you an idea of where they fought, who they were. I did try and track at the time a few of the fallen, just to see where they lived and where they fitted into the parish and where their parents were. But I didn't get very far with that. I think more work can be done. There's a huge more work can be done. There's no doubt about that.
Any more questions? Yes?
Just one thing, a bit of lateral thinking, that nearly every community certainly had a church with a war memorial. Right?
Yeah.
You probably know Rodney Stoke is a thankful village. They got one.
Yeah, I was wondering about it, yes.
And there's some double thankful villages, of course,
Yes.
and then nobody else in either way.
Yes.
We've got to have a look.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there is one by the church actually, but have a look.
I think most places that have got a church have got a memorial, to be honest, of some sort. Of some sort.
Yes. Well, but Rodney Stoke, being a thankful village, they didn't lose anyone.
Right, I'm with you now.
They have a memorial to those who serve.
Oh, right, okay, right.
Inside the church.
Right, okay, yeah, right. Yes. I've got a question. You talked about the small school on Winscombe Hill.
Yes.
Is that building still existing?
I don't know.
Right.
For sure.
I didn't know whether that was now the churchyard room. It's not.
No, it's definitely no. It was up on the Acton estate.
Right. Yeah.
I think it was more or less on the road, but I'm not quite sure. I mean, there was another school in Winscombe at the time anyway. There was a British school that ran out of what is now the Scout Hut.
Right.
And maybe Mrs. Jackman's school up there was mainly for the estate workers and things, but yes, the British school was in operation down in Woodborough.
Right. It's extraordinary. We seem to have had an awful lot of schools around the village.
Yeah.
Yes.
The schools were coming in from
Yes.
War's time, weren't
Yes. It's sort of the start of academy, it seems to me. You could set up your own school and yes. Yes. Okay. Any more questions? No. Right. Lois, thank you so much. We have a small little gift for you, token of our appreciation.
Oh,
A little gift for you. So thank you very much.